Tonight, I'm going to be talking about rapid reskilling in the age of AI. And a little bit about me, real quick, is that I am the founder of Mike Wheeler Media and Exam Ready Now, my new learning platform. And just FYI, I've have a special discount code of Nashville, so you can save 25% off on there. And my goal and my mission is to train, inspire, and equip you for your own cloud career. I have 8 Salesforce certifications and 1 retired certification. So I don't have as many as Ryan does, but I'm getting there. And I've now taught over 300,000 students on the platform across 189 countries. And that would be on the Udemy platform, LinkedIn Learning, edX, and now Exam Ready Now, my own platform. And recently, my AI courses have reached bestseller status as well. So now I'm a best-selling instructor for both Salesforce and AI, and have been doing more and more in the ChatGPT AI prompt engineering realms here recently. And so I have worked professionally on the platform as an administrator, business analyst, developer, consultant, and now trainer. I also volunteer my time for the Tennessee Youth Symphony as a coordinator for public relations as well. Also help with their own Salesforce instance. People ask how to keep your skills up if all you're doing is training. And so I try to stay involved on the platform, and I'm in Salesforce just about every day, investigating what is happening, et cetera. And finally, I firmly believe that AI is massively underhyped right now. So we'll dive into that as well. But I want to start off with an IBM report that I want to share with you and pull up as well. And this report, the takeaways were that 1.4 billion people will need to reskill in the next 3 years, and that's because of AI. Some of the main takeaways is that jobs will be augmented more than replaced, but I do anticipate, and I've seen reports from other entities such as the World Economic Forum, that there's going to be unprecedented churn in the next three. And that's because there will be some jobs that will be automated and made obsolete. But then in its wake with AI, there'll be many more jobs coming about in the future in different paths that don't even exist even today that we're unaware of. But the main takeaway from this particular report is this graphic that is incredibly hard to see and small. But the main point here is how to refer to this or to read this is that, and this is an IBM report, they survey executives about every 3 years. And back in 2016, proficiency in STEM skills was at the top at 42%. But now we see a rise in soft skills here in 2023 with the advent of generative AI reaching the mainstream. And so there's this fundamental shift happening to where most of these top most desirable skills that executives are looking for are now what are referred to as soft skills, such as time management at the top, and then ability to work in a team environment, ability to communicate effectively. And you will see on pretty much universally on any job description, one of the nice to haves or one of the requirements is good communication skills as well. And then you start to get into some of the hard skills as you get down here. And so the concept here that I see is that there's this seismic shift in where we have STEM skills and some of these technical skills, the demand for that falling off a cliff in so many words, but then we have the soft skills rising to the top. And so I asked ChatGPT to segment those as far as between hard and soft skills. And I think we'll be able to make this slide deck available after the fact. So we'll be sure and get this out to you all if you want it. But segmenting those different skills between soft and hard. And so this, there's a lot of implications here for me because I've spent years teaching online. And one quick question while I'm presenting, can you still see me on camera or do you just see the slides?
We see you in the corner.
Okay, awesome. Very good. Will that be part of, okay, very good. All right. So with that said, I just want to make sure because I have other ways of doing this if we need to. Now, so what I would encourage as far as moving forward, the primary takeaway, if you gain nothing else from tonight, is to think about the intersection of hard and soft skills. And there's a hybrid skill that it would be problem solving. And this is, I think, your key moving forward to navigating where we're heading in this new landscape. Being able to thrive in the age of AI is to really excel with the ability to problem solve. And that is an amalgamation of all of those skills in some ways. But this is where you can start to hone in on and leverage your soft skill abilities and your technical acumen as well. And that is what most organizations are looking for. And I'll talk more about getting inside the head of decision makers and how to use ChatGPT or other AI to help you do that and then position yourself as someone that can help problem solve and solve those problems. That makes you a more desirable candidate. And I oftentimes have students tell me that they're always being told they don't have enough experience. And 9 times out of 10, that is an excuse because they don't want to tell you that you're boring or they don't want to work with you or you don't have any compelling stories to tell. And if you convey a sense or a confidence in being able to problem solve, then that can overcome a lot of objections. And so I think that's a very key and important skill. It's the one skill to rule them all, if you will, heading into the future. And this leads me down the path of this concept of what I see as a seismic shift of constraints. And a little notice here as well, these images, I generated these using AI through ChatGPT, the ChatGPT Pro into Dolly, their image generation tool. And the era before the release of ChatGPT and generative AI reaching the mainstream, there were all the tech executives out there were saying the same mantra that anyone could code. And that was suspicious to me because I don't believe that everyone can code. But the reason they did that was because they didn't have enough bodies, they didn't have enough people. The greatest constraint at that time was a lack of human capital of those that could actually code proficiently. Anyone can begin to code and can produce a hello world output if given the syntax that they need to enter in. But then once you start to get to different levels of proficiency or different levels of complexity, then you start to see the number or percentage of people following through with that starts to fall off a cliff as well. And you can see that at code.org, even their own numbers reveal that. But the tech executives, they were hoping to be able to recruit more and more people in order to do those jobs. And they were hoping that more and more people would at least believe that maybe they can as well if it's saying anyone can code. And so this was a way of trying to increase those numbers. Now, been a massive shift over the past year now because of the post AI timeframe here with the release of ChatGPT. And of course, AI has been around for a long time, but truly crossing the chasm into the mainstream was with the release of ChatGPT on November 30th of last year, not even a year old. And so now we see Mark Benioff on stage at Dreamforce saying anyone can be an Einstein. And once again, this is another generated image from Dali here, but the new mantra is that we can elevate, quote unquote, your intelligence by using this assistant or this co-pilot as far as ChatGPT or other generative AIs as well. And so now the ability to code, even though it's still very important and still very much in demand, it's not now the greatest constraint on the technological landscape for these tech companies. And so now the greatest constraint would be time. And this is something that is an asset that is finite. And once you spend it, you don't get it back as well. If I go back a couple of slides as well, see a little delay on that screen, kind of threw me, is that the topmost, rising to the top most critical skill required of the workforce of the future is time management. Okay. And so this is not something that I'm just pulling out of thin air. And this is me making sense of what those numbers reveal after IBM does their survey of thousands of companies and thousands of executives as well. And this is borne out as well in other reports that I've been seeing, such as the World Economic Forum. And so this concept of anyone can be an Einstein goes beyond Salesforce, though, because what Mark Benioff is saying is that anyone has the acumen and the ability to now know more and to understand more. And they have that digital assistant, if you will, by way of an AI. And so now we're entering into this era of it going from basically a low code era to potentially a no code area, and there will always be underlying code. There will always be a need for developers. But now the ability to code has been fundamentally democratized to where this is one of the complaints that I had about trying to develop is that we as the humans had to cater to the computer and learn its syntax rather than the other way around. And so now we are reaching this point where we can code using natural language and we leave it to AI tools to be able to translate that for us. And that's very powerful. And so you'll start to see more and more mentions of low code or no code. And you will see as well that these menial or time consuming tasks can and will be outsourced to AI. I think there's people tend to romanticize or think that they can somehow resist the inevitable technological advances of whatever era they grow up in. And if history tells us anything about humanity and especially about business, is if there's a lower cost alternative that will be outsourced. It must in order for the businesses to survive because the competitors are doing that. And so the fastest path to going out of business is to be resistant to technological advances. And so this does lead, if we embrace these tools instead of fighting them, to this burgeoning prolific productivity. It does give us the ability to do more with less and in a quicker time frame. And so that is very helpful with being able to have effective time management if you know how to leverage tools such as ChatGPT. And so then is also we're going to see advances from going to this co-pilot stage where it is an assistant that is at your beckoning call to where it will begin to take agency and be able to do things for you. And being one that uses ChatGPT an immense amount and doing prompts that are in the hundreds, if not thousands of words at a time, then over time, I have to babysit ChatGPT and wait for it to spit out what I need, and then I need to read that and do the next thing. And so eventually, this is going to become more automated to where I can give directives and it will, whatever the AI is, and it will go and do what I'm needing it to do as well. So just giving you a glimpse of where I think things are heading and what to be aware of. Okay. And then the background image generated by AI as well. All right. None of this is real. Okay. All right. So a few points here. This is a very busy slide. And I was trying to get Dolly to generate a snuggie that said AI is not a fad. And it came up with this, but I digress. But I do believe that AI is actually underhyped and we all are underestimating just how fundamental this is. And the reason I say that is not because I have some vision for the future, but I have a clear view of the past. I'm old enough, I have the gray beard to prove it, to where I was around when the internet was born. And that was something that I had no idea it would. And so now I'm taking that perspective of if I had a time machine and could go back in time, what would I do differently at the birth of the internet? And then go and do likewise in this new age of generative and predictive AI. Okay. And so there's things that I'm doing behind the scenes. And also the reason that I'm talking this way is I know that I vastly underestimated the internet, even though I thought at the time it was the most amazing thing. And I knew that eventually there would be business done on the internet. I was trying to figure out how to make money online and all those sorts of things. But I could not simply imagine where it would be 25 years later. And so that will hold true as well with AI. We simply can't imagine what is possible where we sit right now. It's just impossible. So I think that we all are underestimating it. And a few things I want to talk about is that Salesforce has been doing Einstein since 2016, and they released Einstein Discovery. I did a course on it, and it was an amazing tool, and it still is. And it had some hints of generative capabilities. And this is where my jaw really dropped at the time, back in late 2016, early 2017, was the ability for it to generate R code. And so then we really saw this generative ability really come to the forefront with the release of ChatGPT. And GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So it generates content. It's a pre-trained large language model. It has its base level of understanding up to a certain date and time. And then it can generate content. It can generate images. It can generate audio as well. It can do speech very effectively. And so one thing to keep in mind in order to help you wrap your mind around where we are right now is that I like to say that generative AI stands on the shoulders of predictive AI, and that we've all been consumers of AI and especially predictive AI in the past, whether that be weather forecasts or financial forecasts. I like to even relate it to the stages of an opportunity in Salesforce and its corresponding the stages and the probabilities as well. And that's past performance setting the statistical probability of an opportunity closing and being won. And so now we have the ability to also leverage AI to help set those percentages and not just an Excel spreadsheet based on that past performance. That helps us do tighter forecasting as well. When you think about AI or algorithms, you've been receiving, been on the receiving end of algorithms. If you ever scrolled Facebook or done a Google search, those are algorithms that take past behavior, search intent, or whatever you spend time on looking at, and giving you more of what you're interested in as well. So all of it is algorithm driven. Then we'll also see the ability to do multimodal AI with text and image and voice as well, all at the same time. It's coming to cars, it'll be everywhere. One thing that you'll find is that there's a lot of objections to AI. Oh, it hallucinates or gets things wrong. And you need to learn to overcome objections. Got some kind of humorous images here. This is someone holding up a light bulb, and a lot of people that are candle makers protesting that, saying, bring back the flame. And then we've got this other one here where they save the wick. And this was just generated by ChatGPT and DALL-E. But the main point is that technology doesn't stand still. And so that today's objections are overcome by tomorrow's advancements. And the quote here would be that you're cashing checks and breaking bottlenecks, if you will. Here's a horse outrunning a car and people trying to keep the car from outrunning a horse. The more modern day setting, I was looking more for something back in the day, but the 12 seconds and 120 feet, that is the first powered flight from the Wright brothers back in December 17th of 1903, coming up on 120 years ago. And so that was a 12-second flight, traveled 120 feet. But then that same day, their best flight of the day was 852 feet and 59 seconds. But look where we are today. This image here I thought was funny. It's no to air and yes to horse. And then sometimes the text is wrong in the images as well. So definitely some growth to go with these generated images here. And I'm not sure what's going on here with all these people on the, I don't know if you can see this too well, but it's a horse-drawn old primitive plane. But the concept and the idea here is that in the same day of their first flight, they iterated and improved and increased the length and the time exponentially. And then you look over the past 120 years to where we are today. The main point is that the problems that we have today with AI will be overcome in the coming days. And so, what to do with this? And I think that this is to round out what my best advice I can give you as far as things you can do to face the future bravely and confidently would be to improve your soft skills. And to do that, thinking about having good soft skills, not only with humans, but also with AI. And that was an epiphany I had, I think, just yesterday, was this concept of these soft skills, thinking, oh, that's just for human to human interaction, but also we need to communicate clearly with AI. We need to collaborate with multiple AIs, multiple clouds. We need to work in a team environment, not that the machines are humans, but we need to develop those soft skills so we can get the desired results that we're after, meet our goals. And then once again, target problem solving, that core skill, that hybrid skill between hard and soft skills. Learn to prompt effectively. Have a lot of thoughts around prompt engineering. It will be a huge thing. And then as well, leveraging AI to get inside the heads of decision makers. And you will always want to be marketing yourself. And even if you're gainfully employed, you always want to be updating LinkedIn and doing things along the lines of, especially if you're looking for your first or next role, you can feed in specific profiles or target specific people and ask ChatGPT to assess what types of problems this person probably is needing solved, and then how you can help solve those, how you can help position yourself as someone that can solve those problems. And then from there, I want you to also be aware of a term that's not in the mainstream yet, but will be, and that's ring attention. Concept there is that there are bottlenecks right now with how long you can prompt things. There's so many tokens, there's so many words that you can prompt before you hit a limit. Those will be blown through, and we will reach a time in the not too distant future where we'll potentially be prompting upwards of 1 million tokens at a time, or 1 million words at a time, or 700, 800,000. And this is like history repeating itself with when you look at memory and speed with computers and Moore's law and that doubling over a certain segment of time. We're going to see breakthroughs upon breakthroughs. This whole concept of ring attention, I encourage you to look that up. And this concept of GPU rings, where data is being moved around in mass so that you can increase the amounts or the limits. And the concept here is that it's going to be so massively, such massive amounts of data, that this is going to lead to a lot of need for those good with document management. This kind of speaks to my technical writer background and my translation background. And then as well, this concept of training a large language model and having that baseline understanding, you will be able to very quickly imagine this feed the entire online help system everything that Salesforce has ever produced, and then all the solution documents in your organization, all the resulting XML and metadata, and even identifying gaps in your organization to where you're training not necessarily a large language model, even, but taking that baseline information and then bringing it up to speed in the context of this chain of thought prompt back and forth with prompts that may be in the millions of words. Okay. This prompt engineering, a lot of people think, oh, prompting's easy. Anyone can do it. Not the case. It's going to be a new and burgeoning field. And so ring attention to GPU rings, pay attention to that. And then I think another thing, if you're wanting to learn to code, I would say right now, learn Python before you learn Apex because there's so much you can, and even I think admins, consultants, business analysts, Python's more approachable. It is vastly in demand. It's the most in demand skill that I see, like on the Udemy platform. It dwarfs the demand for Salesforce skills. But you can use Python to do data manipulation, data wrangling, scripting. I've used AI to generate Python code for me to do the mass trans or conversion subtitle files from one format to the next, and done a lot of data things with Python or data generation for data loads of fake data. That's something you can do. And so those sorts of things are what you can do with Python. And that will help you to laterally move or have a skill set that's very much in demand. And I think as well, it's more approachable from a programming perspective before you start tackling something like an Apex, more object oriented. And it has a lot of practical purposes. And then also, oh, by the way, a lot of these AI jobs and engineering jobs are looking for Python skills. Okay. And so then accept the fact I could be wrong, but in the near future, flows will be prompted. And you may think, oh, there's so many limitations. And there are. It's the 12 seconds and 120 feet of the Wright brothers flight. But we will get there where we'll be able to craft a story that will be able to create flows. And now, not only can you do this with text, you could do this with audio, combination of images as well. This whole multimodal process of where we'll be able to back and forth, voice, text, audio, images, et cetera, to be able to inspect. And it reminds me of choose your own adventure books back in the day, and where you would just decide which path you want to take. And there's going to be more and more intelligence to where it'll be conversational AI in a way, whether it's text or voice. And Salesforce will get in other systems to where basically you need an automation. It will ask you the parameters, what you need. It'll know enough to ask you some potential gotchas. It'll know enough to know latest advancements because flows change and are updated at every release cycle as well. There's new things that can be done and also identify things that need to be updated. And so flows will be prompted. All right. And final kind of parting advice here is that I would encourage you to become a creator in a consumption world. That's just something that I made my own mantra to my own children as well, is that this is where you will always be in demand is if you have the ability to create. And with the low code and no code abilities of Salesforce and AI combined, this is a great time with a lot of opportunity to be able to create things and execute on ideas, and that is very important to be able to do that, whether those ideas are your own or someone else's, and people will pay you to execute on those ideas. And the amazing thing as well with AI today is that it can take you through that entire life cycle. So even if you don't have ideas, it can help you to come up with ideas. So I have this 3 point alliterative thing here as far as ideate, iterate, and then immerse. And I think I would encourage you, as we're on the forefront of the early days of AI as well, to treat it like a buffet where you are really hungry, you're wanting to eat, but you have so many options. So you're going to just try and nibble a little bit and see what you really like, and then immerse yourself. And that's where you would niche down with the specific skills. It's like this feedback loop. You get exposure, you follow your interests, and your skill set will start to guide you as well, and then you'll start getting feedback from others like, wow, that was really good, or that was very helpful. Or you'll start getting calls and emails from recruiters about specific type of jobs. And there are so many new jobs coming down the pike around every aspect of that new equation from Salesforce as far as data plus AI plus CRM plus trust. And just know that those are the new four fundamentals of Salesforce. And each of those will, even though AI is one of those devoted legs of the table, the other three will also have AI infused throughout it as well. I'll close that out by opening up for questions and then also just encourage you to check out examreadynow.com. Just I've been in a soft launch forever on that platform and been doing my live classes, but I've got just about everything in place now and have a special code for Nashville. So enter Nashville checkout, get 25% off any of my subscriptions or courses. You can do all courses monthly or annual or just buy individual courses. With that said, what questions do we have?
I'm really interested in whether you have examples or have seen examples of the time management piece combined with AI. I think about things like how long it takes to calendar a meeting with a bunch of
Yeah.
people, right? Like it's a simple example of, oh, we have to go into Outlook and see when everybody's available and when's the best time to schedule with these 10 people. Like that with ChatGPT AI today as an example of how it could help with time saving sort of rote tasks.
Right. So I think that Google has their own AI assistant or copilot that can do that. And I think Microsoft does as well. It would be something on the sidebar to where you could prompt or speak saying, I need to schedule a meeting with these 10 people. What's the optimal time to do that? I know that's a real hassle to try to do that. It would be harder to bounce out of whatever program you're in, calendar or whatever it may be. But you could, in theory, if you have access to everyone's calendars, feed in all that information and it could come back with information for you. And always like to find excuses for using AI so that I have personal experience to speak to. And one recent example was we were tasked with going and shopping for gift baskets for a wedding for some family friends of ours. Okay. They were paying for the gift baskets. They didn't have time to do all the shopping. And so my wife, Christy, she took notes as she met with the parents of the couple and took the down just the demographics of the nine different families basically that we were on the hook for coming up with gift baskets for. And she had all this information. It was written on her iPad. It was very organized, but to try to put together a shopping list would be a nightmare, at least for me. And so I actually did this was my first voice prompt ever into ChatGPT. I just quickly read through the names of the people, the relationship to the family, so we could keep track of which category it would go in. And then things like allergies. Are they diabetic? Do they like alcohol? Do they like chocolate? And some of them we didn't really have much information on. So it surprised me. And then be sure as well to do something that's local that has to do with Nashville as well, because these were people coming in from out of town. Put that in. It took me 4 minutes to speak all that. But then within the next minute, I had my shopping list all categorized. Now we still had to go out and get it all, but you can even have it plan routes for you. It can plan routes and avoid left turns and that sort of thing. Time management is immense. And I'm doing more and more kind of opening up and being more vulnerable with AI as well. This is where the whole soft skills with AI comes in. Is not being so self censoring and talking through, okay, here's one of my concerns. I have these difficult things to navigate sometimes. And it's okay, if I approach this situation or this client, is this going to upset, or how can I navigate this to where both parties feel like it's a win? Negotiation skills, teamwork, et cetera. So I think those are some real world examples. So always think, how can I leverage AI to help me find some time savings? Because that will not only be a benefit to you, but also gives you a story to tell in interviews.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike, we've got a question in the chat. He's asking if you could expand on the concept of ring attention and tokens.
And prompting limits are soon to be overcome. And it's this concept, and it was a research paper called ring attention. And other keywords would be GPU rings. Those are different types of memory, if you will. And that's one of the limitations is the limits of memory and how expensive that is as well to generate and deal with all these tokens and everything. And scientists have figured out ways of moving that data around and have it be in motion and not be just static, basically. How they did it, I don't understand, but I did feed it into ChatGPT. I asked it to explain it to me like I was not a 5-year-old, but like a high school student. I don't want it to make silly names and that sort of thing. And then I started doing some chain of thought prompting as well about what I thought that might mean and what the article was implying was we would have the ability to prompt in the millions of words and what some of those use cases might be. And I riffed on that very briefly as far as being able to feed all the online help. That's one of the problems with ChatGPT is the knowledge cutoff dates, which are getting closer and closer to real time. And eventually, I think will be, there's also plugins to where you can access real time information. But if you have, for example, all of the online help from Salesforce, all the release notes, and if you're feeding that into the same chat history there, and if you have the ability to do that, this is a way of training that baseline large language model to now have specific information and details. There are other ways of doing this now as far as lang chain and training on your own data as well. And there's going to be companies that will have their own, much like right now, we are able to purchase apps off the App Exchange, and now we're able to install flows and Lightning Web components. We will be able, I believe, to be accessing specific trained large language models for specific use cases, much like we do apps on the App Exchange. So, with that as well, is that the next advancement will be not even so much doing that as far as the more traditional large language model training and then going from there, but doing a lot in the context of these very large prompts and then having to take that data back in. And it's not a one and done, it's not a zero shot prompt. That's another term that's out there in prompt engineering land, but it's more of a chain of thought prompt. And a lot of this has to do with reasoning things through. And so the more you can prompt things along the concept of setting the persona for the AI as far as them serving in a certain role and then help me to reason this through. And I do that with these sorts of concepts to ask questions like, does this mean that we will be able to do, in essence, large language model training by way of prompts, large prompts? And ChatGPT came back with, yes, but here are some potential obstacles. And then I went, okay, how might those be overcome? And then, okay, and those can be overcome and probably will. And then, so what are the likely names of what that will be? And it gave me, I asked for a list of 10 names and then I asked for domain names that would fit around that. And then I bought all 10 of those domain names. So basically, I'm looking into the future and it's highly speculative, but I'm buying up domain names around. I didn't get ringattention.com, so I bought ringattention.net. I also purchased GPU Ring and GPUrings.com. And I'm hoping to, I don't have them up yet, but to provide more educational information there on those landing spots. And there's so many new terms nowadays. And this is something that I think is fascinating is that you see Mark Benioff and others at Dreamforce, and even before some of the world tour things and pit stops before Dreamforce, where they're workshopping all these talks they do at Dreamforce. And they start showing these slides about the prompt studio and the journey of a prompt and toxicity detection and prompt grounding and all these new terms that I never heard of. And if I've not heard of them, a lot of people probably haven't heard of them. And so I'm buying up those domain names. It's not infringing on Salesforce's IP because these are concepts, not trade names. I'm always a respecter of trade names. And so that's a long answer that I'm getting off onto a tangent, but I provide that as a background though to show you that this is where my focus is to. I think that I played a role in bringing a lot of new people into the fold with Salesforce. And now we're finally hitting a point where that supply versus demand ratio of human talent is not so much in the new person's favor, if you will. So I am trying to help solve that problem by seeing where this is heading so that people can help differentiate themselves down from the crowd. And that's why I'm talking about things such as rapid reskilling in the age of AI.
Thanks, Mike. Looks like we have another question. I also see thank you all for you guys are information sharing in the chat, which is great. If anybody else has resources to share, you can post them and we'll add that to the after event kind of summary so everybody gets them. So Mike, the next question is from Nancy. Have you seen a trajectory of improvement in AI tools adhering to what we might refer to as common sense?
It's somewhat, especially in the early days, it seemed like ChatGPT had its good days and its bad days. And there was a time when they fed it some pre prompts and some limits and really tried because it was going down all the time and it wasn't available. So they're trying to limit usage. And that's improving. And then I think that my ability to prompt has improved because I've been doing a lot of recording and I'm currently recording a prompt engineering course. And I'm learning a lot in the process as far as zero shot prompts, chain of thought prompts, and concepts around what I call prompt silos. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but that's a concept that I'm going to try to make a thing. Because if you change the subject too much in the context of one chat, let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let me just be more, let's see, stop sharing. But if you try to do too much in the context of a single prompt and you start changing the subject, the AI gets confused and it starts to regress and revert back to prior things or forgets more recent things. So some things you can do with that is it's almost like having a very tightly focused permission set in Salesforce that just does one thing and it does it well. Gives someone ability to use Lightning, or gives them the ability to delete cases, and that's it. And so, really approaching a new chat, click that button often, if you will, rather than continuing on a previous chat. And what that gives you then is a growing and robust prompt library, but keep those siloed. And you can always feed in previous conversations into a new chat. You could share it and then suck that into another account as well, and then branch off from there. And so prompt siloing, there also, if you've ever noticed, whenever you copy and paste output from ChatGPT, paste it into a text editor, if there's a lot of asterisks and dashes, that's known as markdown, and that is the output that ChatGPT provides and it's formatting. And you can actually use Markdown for your prompting. That helps to add emphasis on certain things or de-emphasize others or organize with bulleted lists or indented numbered lists so that it can help the AI have things more in focus. And if you need to learn Markdown, you can prompt ChatGPT or you can do your prompt and ask it to improve your prompt by doing it in Markdown to give it greater understanding. And then sometimes I see, and this is a concept you may want to look up, like adversarial networks or GANs, where you have one AI produce an output, then another AI inspects that and finds errors. And then basically it's two AIs talking to one another. You can take that same approach, asking ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using. Someone mentioned Claude by Anthropic, which does have a larger limit than ChatGPT, but still not in the millions, but you can ask it to improve upon the previous output as well. So it's this iterative approach, if you will, this back and forth. So it has improved as well, and I think it'll continue to improve. I think that's where we are now. And there's still a lot of challenges, still a lot of limitations. Saw that even as my slide deck with some of the words having typos, and that will be a thing of the past before too long as well. But yeah, what other questions?
See that Jennifer is curious when your prompt engineering course is going to be
Uh,
available if you have a
I hope
an
soon.
expected date.
I know enough now not to give dates. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. In an ideal world, it would be before Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So that's my goal because that's when a lot of business happens. But the sooner the better as well. And I've learned as well, courses are a work in progress and it's continually evolving and improving. My admin course that I released on March 30th of 2016 has gone through several reinventions and additions, and I'm continually updating my courses. And then that's one of the challenges as well. And this shift to soft skills is a welcome thing because those have more shelf life, whereas Salesforce is updating 3 times a year. But the concepts with the prompt engineering, because I do have a ChatGPT course in prompt engineering now, it's on Udemy. Exam Ready now, my platform is specific to Salesforce certifications and some AI in there for that. And the AI associate certification is available on their course for that as well. But the specific prompt engineering and ChatGPT courses are on the Udemy platform. And that's the one that's reached bestseller status as well. So in the meantime, you can check that out. Just search for Mike Wheeler on Udemy and you'll find that course there and check that out. But the point of prompt engineering or this new course is it will not be specific to ChatGPT, even though I use that as a tool. I'll be diving into other tools as well.
Awesome. We've got 3 questions in the chat. So we'll start with the top
Yeah.
one. Pamela is asking, what organizations do you see leading the way or pushing the envelope in their use of AI in the Salesforce ecosystem?
In the ecosystem, hopefully Salesforce. A lot of it remains to be seen. And I think that we're still waiting for that to shake out. And I've not looked at a lot of what's happening in the ecosystem. I'm more looking at research papers and starting to get exposure to Claude and these other AI tools from different companies. I know that there's organizations out there that have solutions, but I'm not prepared to speak to that. I am starting to request demos of solutions. I'm approached by companies wanting me to talk about their solutions, that sort of thing. And that's the catch 22 because you want to give your unvarnished opinion. But if I'm a paid sponsor, so I've never to this point done affiliate marketing in this space, unlike many in this space that are experts. You start to see the same circle of people promoting each other's stuff. And I used to do affiliate marketing. I really promoted the Snuggie back in the day. And so anyway, I don't know. What's the
Thank you
next
for the
question?
transparency.
Yeah.
Connor is curious, do you find Bard or any of the others do better with certain prompts or tasks, coding or Salesforce specific tasks, for example?
I haven't tried out the other tools a whole lot yet, so don't know on that either. It's mostly been ChatGPT, starting to dabble with other things, but for me, I've got the pro account or the plus account or whatever they call it for ChatGPT, and I use that very immensely for all sorts of things. And so I think that this would be an interesting thing to do. This would be a good YouTube video for someone to do or to do a course on as well. The world doesn't need a 12th flow course, okay? Other 11, and also, by the way, a lot of people aren't learning to flow, okay? And that's based on numbers, that's just based on the marketplace. But what we need are use cases like that, comparing ChatGPT versus Bard versus Claude or whatever ones are out there for specific use cases like creating flows or Apex triggers, visual force code, or whatever it is, formulas for validation rules. Or you could take the output from one, feed it into the other, have it improve, and then just do that ping pong back and forth. I think this could be some interesting exercises, either on demand or live or whatever, and put them to the test.
Thank you. Chuck, there is another question, but Chuck actually just commented. There are head to head comparison videos on YouTube that rate all the major GPT tools across multiple criteria, and he recommends them. They're worth watching.
Cool.
Just as a cap on what you
Yeah.
said. And then the final question I'm seeing, Marshall's curious, in addition to ChatGPT, what other resources in the AI world you use?
Let's see. So I've got a list on my marker board. I've used opus.pro to do and identify potentially not viral necessarily, but shareable moments from long form video, such as this one. And I will be running this video through that in order for it to help me to segment and identify. And it can create reels for you. And if you see a lot of these reels out there that have the captioning and the words highlighted and all the fancy stuff and the weird cuts, can do a lot of that for you. And then I've also used Rask.ai for translation. I've used it for converting some of my courses into Spanish, and it looks like I'm speaking Spanish. And so that opens up questions about ethics and how forward should you be about, okay, Mike's not really speaking Spanish. And you can tell because there's not that exact alignment with my lips and everything. And I probably should add a caveat like this was generated with AI. I think that's more in line with Salesforce's trusted AI principles. Because I read a story about, I think it was the mayor of New York City was doing robocalls in different languages, and then people thought he spoke those languages, and there was some pushback on that, like it was being misleading or whatever. And I get his desire of wanting to get his message out and get it out to everyone, and I would probably do the same thing. But then it's like, okay, I don't speak all these different languages. And then these tools have even gotten better since I've used that particular tool because they now will lip sync and replace your lip movements to be in the cadence of your spoken word with the local dialect and accent, but also modeled after your own voice. And so it is really interesting what's capable there. Other AIs using DAL-E for image generation a lot for presentations and social media. I feel like because recently on LinkedIn, because of my as seen on TV background and promoting the Snuggie, I was the creator of SnuggieSightings.com and SnuggiePubCrawls.com. And the first site went to the top of Google Trends within 3 weeks of its launch. So I was very deep in the weeds with as seen on TV. And so now I'm thinking back to that and doing these silly things like asking for a golden hoodie made out of ShamWow material. To me, it's funny, but it looks really cozy too. So these are some products that should exist, or Salesforce logo on a Snuggie, and it's more of a Snuggie hoodie with that particular blanket with sleeves. but it's taking all those pieces together. And these are different AI tools that I've used. I'm trying to think what else. I was recommending someone they were transcribing a long talk. And a lot of times, whenever you feed something into a tool such as Descript, which is another tool that has more and more AI coming into it, it will mishear things, or because I speak with a Southern accent somewhat, and this drives me crazy how these tools, they don't know what GPT is, and it always says Chad GBT. So you take that output, and then you can either prompt that if it's short enough, you can prompt that into ChatGPT or another tool and say, here are the things that I speak about often. Salesforce, one word, no uppercase F, and I talk about Chat GPT always represented this way. And so it can correct some of the mishearings as well. So I use AI tools for that. My platform that I use for Exam Ready now has AI baked into it now. I've not used those tools yet to structure courses, but course creation and content creation is getting more democratized and easier to do by the moment with AI. So a lot of tools out there. And then my son has used Photoshop and other Adobe tools to take a backyard scene of his wife just walking across their grass lawn and a fan blowing her hair, and replaced that scene and made it look post apocalyptic. There's the path that she's on, but she's surrounded by destroyed buildings, and it was jaw dropping. And so I guess I'm getting more used to my jaw dropping every few days with some surprise. And I think we need to get used to that.
Awesome. Pamela's got another question. What about
Okay.
privacy concerns if personal or business information is being loaded into the models by our sharing our info
Right.
via our prompts? Sorry, my brain like really messed that up.
Let me read it here. Okay. Yeah, privacy concerns, you can turn off the ability for, I guess the question would be with these tools, ChatGPT and others, is you can turn off the data retention of those, but do they really not retain that information or not? And this is where Salesforce is taking great pains. And you'll find diagrams around their trust boundary and their metadata framework and the journey of a prompt and this whole concept of zero retention. And most of those words I own the domain names for. And because, wow, I never heard of that. But the concepts are that you you have the ability to have your own large language model, and they partnered with a lot of different organizations to where you have control over that. And so any proprietary information or potentially sensitive information, you would not want to be just prompting out into the wild inside of ChatGPT. And so, yeah, there's some things that you need to take care with. I know people have been fired for putting code into ChatGPT and then that finding its way into the wrong hands, if you will. So you do want to treat it like you would any sensitive information. I think that we have more understanding of that now with some of these newer regulations such as GDPR and HIPAA, and just treat it like you would if you knew someone had a serious illness. Okay, we don't need to be sharing that, or you don't need to be sharing your mother's maiden name. Just like if someone were to call you out of the blue and ask for your date of birth, that you'd start getting a little suspicious. So definitely some concerns as well, because you could be nefarious and you could inject false information about a competitor as well. So there's got to be a lot of thought by a lot of bigger brains than I have around how to mitigate some of those prompt injections and ill intent sort of situations. So definitely there'll be a lot of careers around that whole trust aspect as well. You know, all four of those: data, AI, CRM, and trust. And there's chief ethics officers and chief AI officers now, all of that.
Thank you. That looks like all the questions we have in the chat. Y'all are welcome to shout out if you have more questions for Mike or continue to post them. But that is all that I see.
One question, Mike. I think you covered it, but let's say you want to get into this and you just want to stick your toe in the water. You feel like the free version of ChatGPT is sufficient enough, or do you need to
Mhm.
go ahead and chip in for
Yeah.
the premium?
Yeah. I think the free side of things is sufficient. And you can go onto Bing as well, and it's integrated there. You've got to use Edge browser. So I'm not a big fan of Microsoft browser products whatsoever. And maybe that's changed now. I don't know. But a lot can be done with the free side of things. And for $20 a month, you can do the plus version. It's well worth it in my view. And this, I can actually pivot this to Ken was asking whose stock should we buy related to where things are heading in AI. I would say buy stock in yourself. And this is something that I did strategically years ago when I was first. This is predates Salesforce. And this is my own thought process here as an entrepreneur, someone looking ahead, is I had finally reached a point of having some discretionary income. And it took a long time to get there. This is a long time ago, though. And so I thought, do I invest in Apple or do I invest in myself? And I'm glad I invested in myself. What that looked like was getting a better computer. And I was going out and getting technical writing clients. And I was focused on ranking number one on Google for Nashville technical writer and started getting some inbound leads. And through that means learned a lot about search engines. That helped me to then build websites so that when the Snuggie hit and I had the idea for Snuggie sightings and where would I go to post pictures of people wearing them out in the wild because I knew that they would, and it didn't exist, and there were 0 results on Google for that. I thought this can simply cannot be, and I spent a weekend building that and got it out, and then it did hit the top of Google Trends, hit across all media imaginable. It was insane, and those were all light bulb moments for me. I would not have learned any of that if I bought Apple stock. Now, yeah, it would be worth more now, but I made probably 1,000 times more investing myself. And I encourage you to do likewise because this is where you can take these nuggets that I've shared and also what you're finding as well and find your own path in order to make your own unique mark. And there's no one else in the world like you either. And so don't worry about what someone else is doing or compare. And I joked about Ryan having more certifications than me, but we can't be looking sideways. We can't be looking at what someone else is doing. We're really focusing on what you have control over, and that is your response to these times and this opportunity. And this is, I believe, the start of the fourth industrial revolution, and where it's at the ground floor. And so, if anything, those of you that are brand new have an advantage over those of us that have been in the ecosystem for a decade or more, because we tend to want to stick to the tools and the tech that we're familiar with, that we're comfortable with. And we have some bad habits, not bad habits, but obsolete habits or things that no longer will matter. And invest in yourself. And that is with time, not so much money. Even if you have no discretionary income and if you're falling behind month by month, financially speaking, we all have the same 24 hours. Is use that to invest in yourself. And that's more time on the clock using these tools, that being AI and Salesforce, at least for this crowd, in order to become more and more proficient and applying that to your everyday life, finding an excuse to use those tools so that when you're asked, what's the most complicated thing you've done on the platform, the Salesforce platform, or how do you use or how have you used AI in a scenario, even if it's an unpaid scenario or a volunteer position or whatever it is, you have a story to tell rather than the sound of crickets chirping in the background. Okay. And that is when, if you don't have those stories to tell, you'll be told you don't have enough experience. Okay.
And on the heels of that, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think I heard that you could get a free developer org with,
I sure
or
hope
am I
so.
wrong about?
If someone finds a way, let me know. I would be surprised. And here's the challenge, and this is going to be the tough situation that Salesforce and all companies face is that generative AI costs money. And so if they do provide that, there will probably be hard and fast token limits behind the scenes. Especially there's limits on the free developer accounts for storage because that costs money as well. The infamous 5 megabytes of the free developer or the Tableau CRM analytics free developer accounts have 45 megabytes, even then tiny compared to what's on our phones. So I would anticipate that they must, I hope, open up that functionality in the developer orgs and perhaps in the partner orgs, or you may have to break down and sign up for a 30-day free trial in order to get to it, as far as like the data cloud and those sorts of things. But as always, if you discover a path to getting your hands on that, get that experience and let me know as well. So,
I haven't read the article. I just put it in the link. Salesforce Ben says Einstein GPT for devs is available.
okay, nice. Good old Salesforce Ben. Any other questions? Yeah, Einstein for developers and DevOrg does require VS Code. Good point, Nancy. So you do have the capability of having that plug in VS Code, Visual Studio Code. Good stuff. All right.
Which is a
So,
learning experience all on its
yeah,
own. But
exactly. Yeah. how's the job market out there for people? What are the challenges there? I can riff on that if you want, just whatever. Okay. See, it's so tough. One thing, having taught a lot of students and seeing a lot of students reach a certain level and kind of plateau, I have a sense of responsibility. Maybe I contributed to that. So that's why I'm doing things like this, but also I'm reaching out to others in the ecosystem that have, I think, some great advice on how to stand out in a crowded market. It's something that is new to all of us because I've been in the ecosystem since 2012. And I remember at that time discussing with coworkers, how long will this gravy train last, if you will, or this nice situation of back in the day. And this is before I was online, before anyone in the ecosystem knew who I was. I would be getting 50 to 75 points of contact from recruiters and hiring managers. And I'd really optimize my LinkedIn profile and always have a mindset of always be marketing as well. But over time, I have seen, based on people posting screenshots of jobs being posted and 3,000 applicants hitting it within a few hours, and many of them having uh, doctorate degrees and that sort of thing, very highly educated. But trying to do more around reaching out to other perspectives, other individuals. So you'll hopefully start seeing me releasing some more interviews with people that also are in some ways espousing soft skills, some, but also some areas of exploration, such as revenue operations or CPQ or field service lightning or field service in general. And this is where I think the direction that we need to collectively head in is not to stop at the admin certification, because used to, frankly, that kind of equaled a job, or if you had even a dabble of experience, that equaled a job. Okay. And if you weren't getting a job, then you must interview terribly. But now it takes more than that. And so if you have some higher level certifications, if you have some experience with some of the specializations, and that's where you start to niche down and that does start to set you apart. And then other things, if you speak multiple languages, I think that's something that people overlook as a key differentiator as well. And let's see, somebody got hired for an internship and then laid off before it even started. That's unfortunate. All right. And then I think as well, having some exposure or awareness around either marketing, sales, or service. So if you have any marketing automation experience, really highlighting that, any sales experience, any service related experience, to where it's not just Salesforce specific, even other tools. And I'm starting to think more and more that the more exposure you have to multiple clouds and the orchestration between them or the integrations between them, and if you're just starting out as well, is trying out these different things and just following where your interests lie as well. And having AI skills on your resume will help you. You'll get a lot more interest that way as well. And if you can quantify that and tell stories as to how you're using AI, either inside or outside of Salesforce. And then there's this mention of this certification grabbing craze being hard to keep up with, especially while working full time. And I think badge collecting craze as well. I'm not a ranger. I use Trailhead, but and I teach certifications. And to me, when I was starting out, because it was so easy to get a job back then compared to now, there is something to be said for attaining the certifications. I think it can be taken to the extreme, and I think that there's always the challenges as well as applying what you've learned in a real world scenario also. But I don't think you necessarily need to collect too many certifications, but figure out what that path is and go from there. And I think all things being equal, that experience trumps certifications as well. Yeah. And I think another thing you can do, and this is something that I've talked about for years actually, because even though the market is tighter now, I did do a survey back in, I think it was 2017, like year two of my online training career, about what are the greatest challenges you face in order to launch your Salesforce career. And the whole not enough experience was the number one objection by far. And so that was true back then. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And core two things I've always said is to make your own experience and then also to volunteer. And a lot of people push back on that. Like the last thing a nonprofit needs is someone volunteering that doesn't know what they're doing. It is a chance for you to get experience. It is in the nonprofit success pack. It's very different schema there on that side of things. But what I'm doing personally is I am volunteering time with the Tennessee Youth Symphony, and they have a Salesforce org that is administered by someone else, but I do help with some ideas and some solutioning or whatever. But also, I'm using that as my own personal honing of my soft skill set and doing things. I'm doing public relations and reaching out to artists and celebrities, trying to get them to either come visit the kids, the goal being for them to perform with the youth symphony. I have a child in the youth symphony as well. So there is that motivation on my part, but having to coordinate with others, having to deal with celebrities and their publicists and their management and all those hoops that you have to jump through and plan a live event and be sure that everyone's safe and that we're within the confines and good graces of the school we're inside of. All of these things that I've not ever had to deal with, kind of getting me out of my comfort zone and start thinking about doing things like that because that can get you in some circles that are not necessarily Salesforce specific. I've gotten exposure to people now that I never thought that I would encounter. And I live in the Nashville area. You never know who's going to come around the corner. I have met famous people just out in the wild. And so, because I'm doing some of this type of community outreach and trying to reach celebrities and performing artists and that sort of thing, I've started to do some different things on LinkedIn as far as posting images of me with Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, or who else did I do recently? Oh, as Nicole Kidman and her husband. I always forget his name. Ran into them at the movie theater several years ago under the auspices of, oh, this is Throwback Thursday, throwing it back to the time I got to meet Steven Tyler. But if I'm reaching out to other artists, I want them to see in my feed that I've encountered other artists. And then as well, we had Grammy nominee Cody Fry visit a couple of weeks ago. We captured a lot of video, a lot of photos. And so we've been posting that as well. Not related to Salesforce one iota, but all of that is strategic. And so the main takeaway here is not that you've got to go and volunteer for a nonprofit, but start having more strategy around what you're doing on LinkedIn, where you're wanting to head, where your goal is, and then start posting things that will align with that so that you will be seen in that light. Is you're what you're asking hiring managers to do is to suspend disbelief. They default to no. Every interviewer worth their salt defaults to no. Your job is to try to get to what I like to call the frictionless yes, and you overcome objections. So, all things being equal, study sells in the overcoming of objections because you've got to be able to do that in the interview room as well. So, think about those things and how you can also leverage AI tools. I'm trying not to be so ChatGPT specific, but he's obviously the most popular and it's the one that kind of brought it all into the forefront. But you can use tools in order to come up with ideas, identify gaps in your resume, identify gaps in your skill set, come up with ideas of how to improve those, how to have stories that you can tell by going out and doing some of these things. Okay. And you'll see that by doing things strategically and using AI, you will have, I would dare say, a 1,000+% increase in your impressions and engagement on LinkedIn. Okay. If you do that, you will be shocked at the impact it has. Anyone else?
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, I can. Hello, Chuck.
Hey, have you used this is my next thing I'm gonna try. Have you used ChatGPT since that's your preferred weapon? Have you tried to build an assessment yet?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I teach Service Cloud. So one of the big complaints that I always hear from people who are studying for the Service Cloud exam that there aren't good practices in Service Cloud exam. What myself and one of my colleagues, Hyderabad, actually started to put together one on or by just using that. Um, that was
Is the audio crackly for anyone else?
Yeah, I was
You're,
trying to figure out if it was just me. Chuck, you're
yeah.
like weirdly echoing and cracking.
It just gradually, I don't know if it's a feedback loop or feedback through our mics being open or something. So I have created practice test courses with ChatGPT to pretty good success. I need to go through and inject the human back into the loop and do some more review and revision. Because I've done so much for the admin certification and focused on it so much, I've taught it live through, I think, 26 or 27 times. I've lost count. I've done 4 or 5 different versions over the past 7 years. I've dissected the exam guide down to the 102 topics. Now it's 100. And I did all that work manually over the years. So this is where that was exactly where I started going down the path of these really long and large prompts. And I would train ChatGPT on, okay, you're an expert curriculum developer and Salesforce expert, astute in writing scenario-based questions, multiple choice, multiple select. And I have done this work for this certification. Okay. So the process, I have it written on the board here actually, is to I first give it the exam guide, the weighting, the knowledge areas, the learning objectives, which are, i.e., the bullet points. But then there's multiple topics in those bullet points or learning objectives. And then I give it my checklist that I created of the 100 topics and say, okay, basically, I want you to do the same for this other exam guide. And it can do that. Okay. And then from there, I can feed it sample test questions from my own admin practice test course that I did by hand years ago. Udemy actually paid me to do that. I didn't want to do it. It's a lot of work. And that's when they were in initial beta mode. They won't pay you to do this now at all. And they don't really push practice test courses as much as they used to. And there is a place for practice test courses in general. I think it's more towards the end of a learning journey than at the start. People look at it as a shortcut. I'm just going to take practice tests and then they're thrown because the scenario based questions because they don't understand the concepts. But then once I have those topics and then start having it learning how to structure questions based on what I've pulled together. And then also Salesforce does provide oftentimes some sample questions. You can feed those in as well off of Trailhead or wherever you can find them. And then you can do prompts where you ask it to do a variation of multiple select, multiple choice, variations on the name of the company. And then as well, trying to find that balance as far as not too verbose, not too easy, not too hard, not too similar. And this is where I need to do more due diligence is making sure and checking them in that it's not okay. It's the same question with just a few words different. But then you can do some fancy things like, okay, based on the weighting of this exam, give me this many for each knowledge area. And then you can do crazy things that I may or may not have done as far as having to export in CSV format for Udemy's bulk uploader as well. But the thing is, and this is when I was talking about having to babysit Chat GPT. I was doing that. And so some of these prompts are in the thousands of words. And some of them, there was so much content I was feeding it back and forth. And you want to be prompting things along the lines of reason with me and help me reason this out. And that's chain of thought prompts, basically. And it's that back and forth. And then also, this is where I started to develop the idea of prompt silos. And so that doesn't get confused and regress. And so I started feeding it. Okay, once it reached a certain point, I said, okay, I don't want you to divert from here. We're going to call this the gold standard. And that would prompt further from there. And then at some point, I would start branching off into new chats and leveraging certain things to do a new version, basically to try and improve it and improve upon it and not be so messy as well. As so I've done multiple versions of that or iterations. So hopefully that's helpful. It is definitely doable. And then from there, you can write study guides. I think probably one of the most fortuitous people out there was Martin Geisner, the founder of Focus on Force. He was acquired by K2 just before ChatGPT came out. And I hear that Focus on Force has videos as well. I have no idea what they've got going on, but I think the business of practice tests and study guides it's not going to be nearly as in demand moving forward because you can have your learning co-pilot right there specific to where you are. You can set up custom instructions so it knows who you are, what your goals are. You can prompt it or have it in the custom instructions to have no preamble, no post summarization. Just give me the facts. So, all right. Anybody else?
Maybe we've come to the end.
I think so.
Thank you, Mike.
Stunned
Again,
silence.
I think we all got a lot out of this, and judging by the chat, a lot of people did. So we appreciate you joining us tonight.
Great. Glad to do it. Really enjoyed it. Great questions. and just looking forward to where things are heading. And so just be sure and reach out to me if you need anything.
Thank you
And
so
I'll
much, Mike.
want to put a plug in too for our national admin group. If anybody wants to join our Slack, it's find our group on Trailhead, and we have a link to the Slack there. So I'd love to have you.
Nice.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
And thank you. Appreciate it.